Hey everybody, happy Friday. Special guest, well, I'm not going to say special guest because you're kind of going to be a regular guest. No, we're going to do shows together ad infinitum till we die, or one of us says something unforgivable to the other, which I can't see that happening. Todd Shapiro is here from the Todd Shapiro Show at Canada Talks 167 on the Sirius XM network. Todd.
Hi, James. Great to be back. I enjoy this immensely. You can tell I dressed up for the occasion. Yeah. That's what I like to do. I like to give you my finest of material. Although it is Hugo Boss, it is Canada Goose.
That's a real Bay Street ensemble.
Yeah, no. I just like, it's Friday. It's a loose, easy day, but it's gotten cold outside. So
yeah, it's a little chilly.
Yeah,
it's a little chilly.
I'm a baby.
You got to walk faster. That's all.
I walk pretty fast.
Yeah.
I'm on edge. So how are you?
I'm things are good. It's Friday, and managed to survive another week of cannabis industry mayhem and madness.
What industry?
Well, what happened this week? Let's talk about this week. I mean, this week was insane on so many levels. But before we do that, actually, let's talk about the rundown of the show, because I always forget that. Next thing you know, the show's half over, and I'm like, oh yeah, here's the rundown. But anyways, in just about 3 minutes, we're going to hear from Laura McCallum with the news. Bruce Campbell from StoneCastle Asset Management is going to be here for the Friday StoneCastle Cannabis update on the cannabis market. Halo Labs, we're going to talk to Kieran Sidhu and Katie Fields together on the set. And then we're going to talk to George Robinson from RavenQuest Bio at 3 or 4 o'clock on a surprise, potentially, announcement. But anyways, all this is speculative and potential, but so let's list the big events of this week, some of which we'll talk about in depth. The ONAMED defaulted on its debt, throwing their future into serious question. Afria came out and reported pretty good earnings and made the statement that they were going to achieve $1 billion run rate by the end of calendar 2020. Bold statement, but then close scrutiny of their financials revealed that they were claiming $93 million or $92 million in distribution revenue without explaining what the distribution revenue was. So we have a vague idea that it was 18% based on a extrapolation of all of the comments made across all of those, but what the hell? So that's kind of weird.
This is the problem, is the numbers and the reporting and the how they put out the books. And I think it's confusing investors. So it's not making anyone feel any more calm about what's going on in the space. It's making people question the space, because you don't see hidden numbers or numbers that are they claim it on here, but it's over there. And you don't see that in the big, real, traditional companies. You see much more clear reporting that an average investor can understand. This stuff is like, they got, it sounds like they got crazy accountants going on, right?
Yeah, financial engineering in the cannabis space has taken on a whole new dimension. And I don't think we've ever seen so much overuse of things like super voting structures and adjusted non-IFRS reporting standards in the financials, and just shenanigans.
And listen, at the end of the day, and this is the whole thing, I'm not the most experienced investor in the world. I'm not someone who comes on this show that might have the education or the background or the experience that others have. But what I have is I represent the very average Joe or Jill who love to invest the retail money, okay? Let's be honest, which we need for these stocks and these companies to survive. You need the retail money. The confusion aspect of it alone is turning off investors, I think. And at what point is there trust? And at the end of the day, it comes down to valuations. It has to come down to valuations at the end of the day. And I still think in the cannabis space, as scary as it is, as we're starting to see numbers come out with time now, that the valuations still don't all measure up. And at that point, I think you're even fearing the investors like myself away. Is that fair? Like what valuation and what company adds up to you? Because
What
some do to
company's
me.
valuation makes sense?
Companies with money in the bank and companies who are doing better quarter over quarter.
Well, the
What do you
best
say?
looking company to me
Yes.
in terms of financial reporting is TrueLeave.
Kim Rivers, an amazing company. I've been following that story. What are they, 40 stores now across Florida?
38.
38 store. That is an amazing
33
story.
maybe,
And
I don't know.
I think, what is the stock, 1350-ish today?
Yeah.
I haven't even really looked today.
Yeah,
but,
let's take it out. Check it out. The symbol is TRUL, and we'll pull it up. Is our NDI up for the viewing audience at home?
I've been a big fan of that company for a long time.
Yeah, actually, so TrueLeave is actually in our the top pick of the Midas Letter 3 top cannabis picks letter, which is for obvious reasons. So here's a TrueLeave chart we're looking at. This is we're looking at a day view. We're going to go out to, let's go out to 6 months so that we can catch. Okay, so here's the high of April, and so let's go back a bit more. Let's make it a year-to-date look. So the highs here.
20-ish, 21?
2186
Yeah, I remember that
was
day.
touched on the 4th of April. And since then, the stocks, I mean, it's only 1327 today. So unlike some stocks, like if you look at, for example, Harvest Health and Recreation, like let's pull up that chart and take a quick peek in comparison. That stock had a high up here of 1433 and is now trading at 360. So it's lost like 70 some odd percent of its value, whereas TrueLeave has only suffered a haircut of what, 40%, I guess.
Listen, the company's doing things right. They're proving out sales. They have tight burn rates from everything that I've studied on them.
Yeah.
Kim Rivers presents very well. They have growth, and I think their only fear a little bit is how are they going to get into the multi-state game. And I my last studying on them, I don't know if they've made advancements in that yet. Do you?
Yeah, we have talked about it, and they've said that we're sticking to our knitting in Florida for now.
Okay.
But we'll come back in just a minute. Here's some news items for you from Laura McCallum.
Here's what's making cannabis headlines this Friday, October 18th, 2019. Canopy Growth launched its 27th retail location situated in Brandon, Manitoba. With 27 retail stores either owned or licensed, Canopy's retail banners represent the 4th largest cannabis retail network in Canada. Avicanna announced that Santa Marta Golden Hemp, a majority-owned subsidiary of the company, has obtained a United States Department of Agriculture National Organic Program certification for its hemp cultivar. The company obtained registration for an additional 15 genetic strains of cannabis. Cannabis Growth Opportunity announced the company's updated net asset value for common share of $2.60 at the close of business on October 15, 2019. This represents growth of 12% since the initial public offering on January 26, 2018, and a decrease of 6% year to date. Fire and Flower Holdings has closed the transaction previously announced on July 22, 2019, to acquire all of the shares of a licensed retail cannabis operator in Regina, Saskatchewan from Mara Cannabis. In connection with the acquisition, the vendor has received $1.5 million in cash and 2.3 million common shares of the company. Planet 13 Holdings has received all permits required to open and operate Rickety Cricket Cafe and Perk Coffee Shop. The bistro and pizzeria is operated by award-winning Arizona restaurant and craft brewery chain Rickety Cricket. And that's your news for today. To keep up to date with all things cannabis, visit the Cannabis Daily on MidasLetter.com.
So one of our long-term sponsors, Halo Labs, is knocking it out of the park on the development side of their business. The stock obviously has suffered the slings and arrows of the tormented industry at large, but that hasn't stopped Kieran Sidhu and his team from advancing the company. And Todd, they're a sponsor of your show as well.
Yes, full disclosure as well. I work with them. I help with brand strategy as well, compensated by them. But one of the things I love about this stock is there's volume. There's lots of volume, and I think that's an important thing.
Monster.
It trades like a monster, and in certain companies, I think if you want to be liquid, at least if you're investing but want to be liquid, I think that's something you have to look for as a trader right now. Halo at least being one of those stocks that if you went in and somehow needed to pull your money out, I think there's a very good opportunity you could do so. I'm not saying you should. I don't give financial advice either way.
You don't?
You know, no, I'm not.
Oh, damn. Yeah, no.
But liquidity, right, is important in trading.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if a stock's not liquid, the chances of it going in either direction is much lower than if it is a liquid stock. So let's take a quick look at Halo's chart here. Oops, wait a sec. 1553. Boy, it's really doing well now.
That's that's
another company in the US.
From 27 cents to yes.
Let's see here. That's not the Halo we're looking for. Where'd it go? Phew, they don't
on
have
the Neo.
it. They don't have the no, that's not it either.
You don't have it.
Oh, so this is interesting. So
this is good live TV, right? Is that what you call right here?
This is it. This is us finding out that TradingView does not actually quote Neo.
Is that why? I was going to say.
So let's look at
Market Watch or
Halo Labs on the OTC symbol, and there's the picture of misery that investors have been suffering, but you can see that it's starting to try to find a bottom here, just like the rest of the cannabis space. So I mean, a company that has $18 million in revenue in the last quarter and is on track for an exit run rate of $42 to $48 million, according to analyst estimates. You pick up that company at 21 cents a share, and life is probably going to be pretty good at some point.
They also just did a $4 million raise, I believe, and a private placement deal. And from what I recall from the news release, and I apologize if I'm wrong with this, at 31 cents. So a lot of movement with Halo, belief from outside money coming in,
right?
And still their expansion, which into Africa. And their dab-tab technology. This to me, obviously, it's sounding biased here, but a very alluring company. And a guy like
Kieran, sound biased. You are biased.
I'm biased. I'm very biased here, but and you buy into management teams, in my opinion, a lot of the time, and you look at Kieran Sidhu's track record.
Yeah, you bet. Here's a conversation we had with Kieran and his lovely and talented assistant, Katie Field was here with us. She's actually their chief strategy officer, and let's roll that. I'm joined now by Kieran Sidhu and Katie Field, respectively the CEO and the chief strategy officer of Halo Labs, and of course by my co-host Todd Shapiro. Welcome, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Let's start off with the discussion surrounding the vape crisis engulfing the cannabis industry in the United States. The Center for Disease Control has issued a warning. The state of Massachusetts has full-out banned vaping. How is that going to affect or not affect Halo Labs? And tell me why.
So, first of all, it's our understanding, speaking to our lawyers and lobbyists, that the state of Oregon right now is going to wait to understand what the federal guidelines are. They've issued some stern warnings about cautioning people about using vapes in general. California's Department of Health also has issued warnings, but the governor has not acted there, so we don't anticipate a ban. There was some talk with LA City Council people about initiating a ban, and we've heard that's dissipated as well. As far as how it's impacted us, Katie can talk about that.
Sure, we've actually seen a little bit of a rising tide in vape sales. So it's something where potentially consumers were thinking something might happen, so they might want to stockpile a little bit. But the other dynamic, I think that's important to note, is that it's drawn awareness. The CDC's guidance has drawn awareness to the fact that actually the cartridges from the black market are the ones that may be causing this illness. Now, of course, there's more root cause diagnosis. They really have to get to the bottom of it. But potentially it can be driving consumers where they should be buying vape cartridges all along, which is from regulated manufacturers and retailers in states that have legal marijuana programs. Mm-hmm.
If you don't mind, is it frustrating for you guys knowing that there is a black market that exists, obviously selling these vape pens that aren't compliant, that aren't being monitored? We're not quite sure where people are getting them, how they're made, and really how it impacts your business because of the reputation of them.
Absolutely. No, that's very frustrating. I think we want consumers to be educated. That's really what we want. And of course, when we manufacture, we're using natural cannabis concentrate. There are no additives. Not only that, our materials aren't grown with those pesticides and those additives that are coming into the black market vape cartridges. So consumers really do need to educate themselves. And so it's frustrating, but at the same time, it's a good time in our history for the conversation to shift to, again, regulated products that are safe for consumers.
Karen, you mentioned that your aesthetic was derived from the concentrates industry,
Correct.
which automatically implies that you're purists in the essential oil case of the
correct.
inputs. So tell me, why does being from the concentrate side automatically give you that sort of mindset?
Okay, because the concentrates are the purest and most broadest spectrum form of cannabis. So effectively, what we do is we take the raw cannabis, either frozen or dried, and we put them in our columns, and then we extract them. And when they come out, then we purge any residual solvent from the extraction process. And those raw products are known as live resin, or shatter, or cured live resin, and then the derivatives like butter and sauce and diamonds, depending on how you purge the residual solvent. So we have always been a proponent of that. Even though the THC content is lower, you have the full spectrum, the CBN, CBG, all of the C's as well. So you get a true experience. And in Oregon, about 40% of our sales have always been derived by concentrates. When you start going into cartridges or oils, you're actually going now through a distillation process. And that distillation process is similar to what you do with alcohol. And so you basically evaporate the THC, you recollect it into a pure oil, and then you have to actually add back the natural terpenes, either botanically derived or derived from the cannabis, to give flavor to it. That's still a 100% natural process. And in the old days, what was interesting, before distillation, we were one of the first companies ever to put out carts, and it was the old plastic carts with an old wax wicker that sat on top of a battery. And our oil would always separate. And even in those days, we knew there were tricks because medical companies use it. They use vitamin E, they use polyglycol, VPEG, all of these products to line the lungs when people use inhaler. And we never used it. So what we used to do was we used to put out a little flyer saying that you got to treat our cartridges like milk, because if you don't treat them like milk, they get too hot, they're going to spoil and separate, or if you freeze them too much, then they're going to still separate. So, I mean, that was always sort of our credo, was always to be 100% natural, and that's why we're so focused on the concentrates.
Okay, so is it safe to say that the principal issue with the health crisis surrounding vaping, is it uniquely to do with the additives that are there to stabilize the main product, which is the resin?
I think that it's probably too early to tell what the precise cause is, and I, for one, am very grateful that the federal government is looking like they're going to start researching and getting to the bottom of it. Potentially, states will be doing the same, and that will be really good. But I do think that is a valid hypothesis, the fact that there are these additives that have been used to keep the consistency of the distillate that is going into the vape pens. So that is definitely one area. But again, another area could be the cartridge itself. Cartridges, we look at them and we think they're the same. They're not the same. It depends on the heating mechanism. Is it convective? Is it conductive? There are so many factors that go into the vape cartridge hardware itself. And that could be an area where there is disintegration once it's heated. Heavy metals, potentially from the hardware, get caught up in the vapor stream. So there really are, I guess the point is, various hypotheses. The one that you mentioned is one of them, though. And we've never put those additives in our concentrate, and we're proud, and we stand by that.
So tell me how the dab tab and the shatterizer are going to protect users of Halo's products from having any health issues?
Sure. Yeah, so one thing to keep in mind is when we were just touching on that, the cause of this potential illness, and we talked about convective versus conductive heating. So this is actually the technology that's within the dab tabs, which means that when you are heating the dablet, and we'll get to that in a second, what it does is it doesn't directly interact with the oil itself that's already infused into the ceramic tablet that's already been safety tested. It's subject to many tests. It's going through an FDA pathway. And so what happens is it's just released, and the hot air is what unlocks and activates, and then that creates that vapor stream versus interacting directly with the metal heating element. So it's the hardware, these two elements, which we have two right here. This is the all-in-one, and then this is the shatterizer. But then the oil itself is in this ceramic tablet. Again, they're subject to certain standards, NSF, ASTM, made in a factory in America, ISO 9000, so highest standards of purity. Moreover, the oil is encased in it again, so there's no interaction with a wick. There's no, direct interaction with a metallic heating element. So it really is a perfectly natural vaporization experience. It's completely natural and very, very, very safe. So we're really proud of that.
When was this product created, and was it created to be proactive in case potential problems with sort of these other cheap vaping methods?
Absolutely. It was created. It was proactive. So the founder, Michael Linders, the CEO of ELO, and he's a complete visionary. And one of the steps in the process to making this was taking all the other hardware on the market, all the other cartridges on the market, and dissecting them. He calls them his Frankensteins. He has so many of these, and you have to get some photography of it because it's just... I remember, growing up, they'd do the Just Say No campaigns, and they'd show us, this is what your lung looks like if you smoke cigarettes. It's that type of thing. When you peel back the onion and you just see what happens to these cartridges when they're used over time, consumers would really be kind of horrified. This was developed for that purpose exactly. This does not happen. This does not happen to the tablet. The only thing that happens is that the color changes because you can tell that all the oil has been vaporized, and that's it. There's no charring. There's none of that.
Does that help for longevity then for the product itself in terms of if you were to buy a dab tab, if you were to buy a shatterizer, that it lasts much longer?
It actually does. It actually does, and that's another component of it too. There isn't the waste that with some of the cartridge you don't like to burn it at the ends because maybe the taste isn't great or you can't get it all out. That's not the case with these, and it's perfectly dosable in that sense as well, which helps the user, the consumer, control their dose, and that's another great benefit. So,
So there has been no instances of any Halo Labs product user having a health issue with vaping.
Not at all, and we have many users of our products every month for the past 3, 4, 5 years, however long we've been in Oregon and then California now, never been an issue. And we know because we stand by our manufacturing methods and we stand by the technology that we use and the hardware that we use. So.
Right, so they're essentially safe.
Yes.
Thank you very much for joining us today. We'll come back to you soon.
All right,
Thanks.
sure. Thanks for having us.
Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Make sure you never miss a show by subscribing to our YouTube channel and clicking on the little notifications bell. If you're interested in getting monthly actionable investment ideas in the cannabis space to your inbox, subscribe to the newsletter at MidasLetter.com. All right, so if you're wondering what was going on with that Chronos trade after hours this week, you're not alone. Todd, you had some, you were watching what was going on there.
It blew me away, James, and we saw it at one point go up over 40% after hours, and I can only imagine someone who had bought it that night, or like 358. Someone bought the stock. Obviously, they must have been losing their minds. And I went on Twitter. I went to my guys who I know sort of understand this stuff a lot better than I do. And it still seemed like no one really had a great explanation of what was going on, but you apparently dug a little deeper.
Well, yeah, so looking at the chart here, This giant spike is what we're talking about. This happened in after-hours trading. Normal after-hours trading is about 40,000 shares, and this day it traded 4 million shares. And what has happened, as our friend at the Chart Guys, Charting Man Dan, explained, was that these guys just loaded in bids and drove the stock up, which caused some panic among short sellers who were forced to cover immediately and helped to increase that momentum to the upside. Now, at the same time, the day previous, there was unusually high activity volume in the 725 calls that were due to expire this week. And so another trader told me that, well, probably what happened is these guys bought a bunch of those calls, then they ran the stock up because they've got deep pockets, sold the calls at a profit, and then rode the whole panic wave back to the downside on the short side, knowing that the shorts were going to come flooding back in as no news materialized and there was no support for that high price based on a fundamental event. So basically, in one camp, it's viewed as somebody with a deep capital pool relative to what most people in this industry are used to working with, came in and just made a very disciplined and structural play where their theory that they'd be able to induce the support of shorts who were going to force to cover, that they were able to do so, that they chose to do so in the after hours market where the amplifying effect of a short cover was going to be much higher than it would be in normal market operating hours, and then to be in a position to ride it short as the absence of news caused the selling to reestablish the price at low levels. I mean, that is the height of sophisticated investing. That's market manipulation 101, but
legal manipulation?
There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
He was investing money. He didn't issue any statements. He wasn't part of the company. As far as we know, he wasn't an insider or anybody who was owed to any disclosure. It was just an investor with the deep pockets.
I know. I saw those blocks like right at about 509. They bought $1.2 million worth. Like it was because it was small blocks leading up to that. So it wasn't even a big buys right after market.
Well, it went up to actually the last few bids were 500,000 share bids.
Why isn't this done more then?
Well, probably
is it a big gamble?
Well, sure, it's a big gamble. The reality was, prior to this, 42% of the float in Chronos was short. So there's a fundamental factor number one. If you know that half the book is short, you know that half the book is very sensitive to anything positive.
Sorry to interrupt, but we see that with a lot of cannabis stocks. I mean, the short game on them.
Yes, but 42% is extraordinarily large.
Okay.
So then you also know that you've got, Chronos doesn't have a whole ton of shares out there. So it's not like an Aurora that has 1 billion shares out. In fact,
1.1.
Hold on here. Let's see. What is the total outstanding on Chronos? Let's see. Well, I'll just take a quick look.
110?
Oh, jeez. Yeah, exactly. It's not much. Hold on. Come on, puppy. Shares out. 341 million.
It's a lot of shares still.
Yeah, a lot of shares, but don't forget a lot of those shares, probably the bulk of them are owned by Altria.
Oh, yeah.
Their big corporate investor.
Yes, of course.
So they're not in the float. So 341 million shares outstanding, yes, but what's in the float? Probably far less than 100 million. So therefore, the few things that the guy knew. Half the float is short. There's not a lot of stock to go against in the regular market, and there's not a lot of stock to go, certainly not a lot of stock to go against in the aftermarket, and there's all these options out there. So he had these three elements that basically it was a risk, but it was a calculated risk.
Would something like that be investigated further? Would someone take a look at that and go, would IROC, would someone go like, what was this unusual activity? Why?
No, I don't think so, because unless it was an insider or somebody with inside knowledge, which there's no
news,
press
nothing
release,
came out.
so
Yeah.
then there's no. It's just a ballsy play. That's way big. It stands out.
Could it
because
have
it's
been
big.
that some news might have been rumored to come out somewhere on the inside that didn't?
Well, that's the third plausible explanation, is that somebody somewhere said something to someone who was short and who said, holy shit, I better cover.
If that comes out.
Right.
Which
And
does it, and if you think of it on those lines, does that still make it maybe a desirable buy for someone that if it didn't come out this week, could have perhaps come out next week or the week after? Obviously, I've heard nothing. I don't even know the stock that well.
Right, right. Yeah, well, that's just it. I mean, nobody really knows.
Yeah.
And the company's not talking, so the rest of it's just speculation.
They didn't make it. Did they do one of those typical news releases of why they weren't? The unusual activity was something that they were unaware of. Did they do anything like that?
They did not.
Oh.
No, they put out a statement. No, their last news release was October 16th. And it said that they were proceeding with a 20 million Australian dollar IPO of Chronos Australia.
And that was a big rumor going on over there that stuff was bought on the Australian market too, or I don't know. It's a weird situation. Again, I'm very inexperienced. I don't know enough about it. I just know enough that it was very unusual.
Yeah, it was really unusual, but and the bottom line is there's so many possibilities of what the real story was that we don't know. So
God, this game's fun.
Isn't it? Don't we have a good time with it though?
Yeah, you got to.
Yeah, but then the other thing that happened, which I'm interested to hear your opinion on, Todd, is Hexo came out with this
$4.49 a gram or whatever.
Yeah, this cheap product that they're going obviously taking a shot directly at the black market and drawing a line in the sand and saying we're here to fight you on this level. And to me, I thought, well, congratulations, ballsy move, but is it going to work? Is it going to backfire?
The buck of beer of cannabis, huh?
The buck of beer of cannabis, exactly.
We'll soon find out. I mean, and will other LPs now have to lower their prices? And will this create a new sort of industry within itself, which is not premium cannabis, but like kind of the crappy cannabis? Like are we just going to sell it at $4, or is it decent cannabis?
Well, that's just it. If you pay $5 for a gram of cannabis on the black market, are you getting their worst cannabis?
Well, we don't know how that cannabis is grown. There's no compliance to that cannabis. I always try to steer people away from the black market, obviously.
I always buy in the black market.
Well, you shouldn't,
because I'm experimenting.
No, well, I think you should support the industry. I actually think...
I do. I buy on the regular market.
You buy in the regular market.
In fact, I buy far more on the legal market.
Good.
And I only buy the black market for research purposes. I actually don't consume the black market stuff.
Well, I
give it to Ed.
The biggest thing for me, James, you give it to Ed's not even here right now because he got some of the
70 milligrams per serving THC. You take this, exactly.
Yeah.
Ed had to go home because he's ate too many edibles today.
No, James just gave it to him. He got it on the black market.
Thank God we were here.
Tagged it. But for me, the bigger issue, I think, is why does 70% of cannabis sales, approximately, still exist on the black market? Why? What has happened in this rollout? And we've celebrated our canniversary now, we're the year in, Cannabis 2.0, edibles are out and stuff, but yet there is still so much illegal selling. I'm sure there's organized crime involved, there haven't been enough crackdowns. Government in general in my opinion, Health Canada hasn't done enough to really put a stop to this stuff, or policing.
Well, this is interesting, Todd, because as a former career indoor grower of cannabis in the black market, I take exception to a lot of the statements made by Health Canada and LPs that this product, we don't know what goes into it. This product is prone to having way more higher levels of pathogens in it. Because the bottom line is the same standards that apply to the legitimate market also apply to the black market. If you try to sell somebody moldy pot, guess who's not coming back?
In the alley to buy it.
Well, exactly. And it's also not sold in alleys. I mean,
I know.
Here's the problem with the black market. It's cheaper, it's just as good. In most cases, it's just as safe, and it's going to arrive at your door in less than an hour, much fresher for half the price.
So how about this then? Why isn't there some lawyer out there, an ambulance chaser, who's gone to every investor in every company that's a legal licensed producer and said, let's arrange a class action lawsuit against the government for allowing this black market to still exist, where Canadians and their hard-earned money have been put into these LPs who, quite frankly, don't stand a chance to compete. And we're seeing what Hexo's trying to do now, because You can't sell it at $10 a gram because you get. So can
There's
we?
my crop in the background there.
That's a nice looking crop. You got your 4 plants. When they pan out, that's the legal version.
Right? No, don't pan out. Don't pull back.
How dare you pan out? I know it's a wild idea, but like, could there ever be a class action suit on investors going? We've been investing in these companies, but they don't stand a chance to do anything against the government.
Yeah, I think.
Is that a ludicrous idea? I'm not a lawyer either. Can you tell?
Well, I mean, I know the lawyer who would do that is John Conroy out in BC, who we actually interviewed for our upcoming film. He is the gentleman who challenged the government successfully on the rollout of the MMPR rules on April 1st, 2013, and forced them to become the MMAR rules. Or no, sorry, MMPR to ACMPR, which is the current regime. Right. So he spearheaded the challenge by which the patients sued the government on constitutional grounds, saying that it would present a hardship for them to have to buy from licensed producers when they have been accustomed to growing their own,
isn't that interesting?
or assigning somebody to grow it for them under MMAR rules. And the reason that MMPR was proposed as an evolution was because there was too much MMAR marijuana leaking directly into the black market. And so this was viewed as a solution. And John Conroy is, he's not blindly for the establishment. He likes to fight for what he perceives as just. For example, he told me that he can't wait till the first case of somebody getting convicted on an impaired driving charge using the current breathalyzer technology goes to court. He says, I'm going to volunteer because there's no way that's going to fly.
That can't prove that person would have been high in driving.
Right. Well,
which, by the way, no one should ever do.
Well,
I don't think so. I don't think so. I
never advocate for doing anything that's illegal anymore, Todd, unless I'm doing it.
Yeah, you're also on camera.
That's right. But, we used to laugh because the only problem that we ever had when we were driving high, which we used to do all the time, was that you'd go too slow. And
what's that scene in Tommy Boy where they're I think they're on some hallucinogenics or whatever, and they're actually only going 8 miles an hour? Do you remember Chris Farley and David Spade?
Right. Well, that's exactly what happens when you smoke weed and drive. So, but still, that poses a hazard. So yeah, there's absolutely not. There are a lot of health hazards potentially with cannabis. I mean, there's very little in life that poses zero risk.
The coffee I'm drinking right now.
Exactly.
You have
could
too much
scald
of it.
you.
I'm not drinking this
10
month.
hits of LSD in it.
I'm doing the Sober October thing, which, by the way, I coined. If you're a Joe Rogan or Bert Kreischer fan, and they do it on a much bigger scale, I had Bert Kreischer on my show in LA in 2015, and I told them about it, and they made it a grand, this huge event, Sober October. But I'm happy for it because it's allowing people to get in touch with health for at least a month and see if that jives with them or not.
You invented Sober October.
I have a tweet on it. If you don't go to I am Toddy Tickles and hashtag Sober October 2011. September 30th, 2011 was the first one I did. Oh. And I have it. And that's what I like about Twitter, by the way. You can document things.
It's a public record.
Yes. Yeah, it's its own blockchain.
Interesting. It's its own blockchain. Well, that's interesting, though I do think it's subject to a little tampering once in a while.
Well, can you redate things?
Well, you can delete stuff.
Oh, you can delete stuff. Who hasn't deleted things?
Right. Well, that's let's not split hairs, but that's what they get so
I'm
upset
actually not a
about
deleter. I don't think I'm a deleter. Have you deleted things?
Have I deleted
I'm not
anything?
a deleter. You're not even a Twitterer. You don't use it enough.
Well, we use Twitter collectively to broadcast
the Midas.
Our Midas Letter content. I don't use it as a personal platform for engagement or debate or argument because
I'm in a debate right now.
Are you?
Yeah, it's angering me.
What's that?
Do we have to go?
Come in, God. I can't quite hear you. Oh, that's right. That's right. I use it to abuse companies when they fall down on their service.
Oh, like Roger. I won't name him. Yeah, well, okay, Air Canada's a good one.
Air Canada's an easy target.
Their price is jacked up these days, man. Jeez.
Yeah.
But I'm in a debate right now.
Are you?
I don't know if it's off topic. We were talking about Hexo and their $4.49 or whatever it was a gram.
Oh, what's the essence of the debate?
No, I'm really angry.
Can we pull it up?
I saw this wonderful, beautiful thread. Yes, I am Toddy Tickles. I saw a really great thread today about the Holocaust, and someone had discovered this really old photo album from Nazi soldiers.
Okay.
And it showed them singing. It showed like this very evil doctor who did all the experiments. I forget his name right now. And it showed them like as just very regular human beings. At the time, they were at Auschwitz while they were committing, these heinous, torturous murders in some case, and some just right to the ovens, and
right.
in the showers and stuff. And I went on this sort of thing going like, you can't trivialize the Holocaust is my big message. And you see these immigrant camps that come over, when you're coming over from the States and you get in, then you put in a camp. And I'm not condoning that at all, James West. I think that's terrible. But I also don't think it gives people the right to call them concentration camps, even though technically that might be a term. It's as a concentration camp, not a death camp. And also, I don't think it ever allows anyone to call Trump, as much as you hate the guy, Hitler. I don't, as having ancestors. My grandmother's brothers and sisters died in those camps. I just think, she came over when she was 12 years old. And you know what she did when she came over?
This is a Jewish thing.
It's a Jewish, and I'm not even religious. My wife's not Jewish. My kid won't be raised Jewish.
Right.
I just think people in this day and age have to be very careful.
I was kidding, by the way.
Oh, apparently the Jews, a couple of them got.
Yeah, well, see, this is what I find
So I'm in a
flawed
debate.
about I see it. I see that, and this is what I find where I find
waste.
Twitter is a completely inappropriate
Yeah.
environment to conduct a debate, because you cannot possibly create the full context of your intention. It's just too small, 400 and whatever, now it's 300 characters. You cannot possibly convey all the thoughtfulness.
I can do it.
Well,
I get message. I call out people all the time on hypocrisy. I don't really ever take one side or the other. I actually try to find the middle in most things. We're a lot like that, where we see goods and bads, we weigh them. Just because you disagree with me doesn't mean I can't go and have a beer with you after.
Well, I consider myself a sophist.
Which is?
Sophist is relevant to Sophocles, the old philosopher. And Sophocles was able to argue just as vehemently and convincingly for both sides of an argument, particularly as it pertained to good and evil, beauty and ugliness, etc. So people accused him, and the term evolved to refer to somebody who didn't really believe anything, was just in love with the idea of arguing. And I like to think that I like to think of myself as a sophist in the classical sense, in that I can just easily argue. I can see anybody's viewpoint, is what I like to think of myself.
You'd be a good ombudsman.
A good ombudsman? No,
you would see both sides, and then
you
could.
Solomon, who's like, okay, fine, cut the baby in half and give each mother half, and we'll see who's the real mother. Except I make them do it.
No. Oh, jeez. James West can be followed to Midas Letter.
No, I wouldn't cut a baby in half.
Or maybe are you a contrarian? You just like to take opposite sides. You've convinced yourself you're a sophist, but you'll just be at a dinner table and you'll just take a contrary opinion to most because you can and you can defend it well.
Right. Yeah, well, that's a sophist. They argue for the sake. It's like, if everybody at the table's on one side, I'm going to take the other side just because.
It's why I talk
They
about.
also call that a prick.
Yeah, we're pricks.
We're pricks and we're douchebags.
Prickists.
Anyway, so let's see.
That's good. Where are we? $4.49 a gram.
Yes, Bruce Campbell is here for the weekly Friday StoneCastle Asset Management Cannabis Industry Wrap-Up. Bruce? I'm joined now by Bruce Campbell, Portfolio Manager for StoneCastle Asset Management with the StoneCastle Cannabis Week Look Back. Hey, Bruce, how are you?
Yeah, doing well again this week, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so some pretty interesting happenings in the space, what with Hexo engaging the black market head on, Dianamed defaulting on their debt, the advent of edibles and beverages, though not really available yet. Where do we start?
Yeah, there's we're not short on news, that's for sure, this week. I mean, the Hexo was interesting. I mean, obviously they came out last week with numbers that weren't that great, and then this week they're coming out with, trying to hit the black market head on with their original stash, which is going to be their $4.49 per gram. It's obviously sold in a bigger package than that. It's 28 grams, but $4.49 per gram, taxes included, to try to fight against that $5 cost that the black market has. So interesting from them.
Yeah, do you think though, I mean, if you look at their financials, $5 a gram, it's not really what you would call a lucrative business, if even break even.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to come down to them growing at bigger and bigger scale to make that really beneficial and make that profitable. Because, as you mentioned, they're used to selling, kind of in that $4, sort of $3 to $4 range to the provinces. And then this is also including their taxes, and, it'll be the marketing and packaging and, kind of everything in there. So they're saying that it'll be profitable for them. I guess we'll have to wait and see in the quarters and ahead, both on, how much volume they do on that product, and also what it ultimately is from a profitability standpoint.
Right. I wonder to what extent the demand for the cheaper product will be, sort of come from the demand for the more expensive product that they've been able to sell so far.
Yeah, I mean, anecdotally, we continue to hear that the big issue with the Canadian legal cannabis is the quality. Most people are used to a certain quality level that they've had from what you would, I guess, consider to be kind of more craft indoor grown black market product, and now the larger facilities with their mass production just haven't got the same quality. So I guess it'll be interesting to see if Hexo is able to duplicate the quality and the price at the same time.
Yeah. Okay, and Balansgrow published earnings this week. What did you make of those?
Yeah, I mean, the numbers were good, both from a top line and a bottom line perspective. I was a little surprised that the stock price didn't react a little more favorably, considering the amount of revenue and EBITDA that they actually had produced during the quarter. But we still seem to be kind of mired in this malaise of the overall sector, and there hasn't really been much from a bottoming standpoint happening here.
Right. Okay, so we saw Aphria put out earnings as well this week that were very impressive on the surface, but have caused some criticism after the fact, with a large portion of the revenue coming from what was previously a non-core business.
Yeah, I mean, that was when you looked at the top line numbers, everyone was cheering, and then obviously as people were able to dig into those numbers, and you saw that a big part was non-Canadian production or non-Canadian sales, people started to get a little bit more critical of what that meant. Personally, I think that continues to be a big market, and so they're going to focus on that, and if that's where they drive their earnings, well, they wait for kind of that supply demand equation to come into balance on the Canadian market, especially with the sort of next generation of products that are going to be released here in a couple of months. Then that's what we want to see from a management team, right?
And so one of the other statements that came out that was really interesting to me is that the Ontario Cannabis Store suggested they might allow LPs to market products directly to the consuming public.
Yeah, exactly. Well, they would, I think, not necessarily directly to the public, but directly to the stores themselves.
Oh, I see.
And I mean, that would open up the distribution, from what I understand, as well. So we'd go beyond, I guess, the 25 or 24 stores that are licensed right now, and then there's this 50 that's in the lottery that continues to be sort of bogged down with legal proceedings. But that would open it up and really allow them to be able to market directly. The one issue that I've talked to a number of producers, and they've said that it certainly gives the advantage to anyone who's out east. So the Ontario producers are going to have an advantage just on logistics and costs to get the product to their market.
Right. So that doesn't necessarily represent an immediate benefit to the LPs.
Well, it could if you're an Ontario LP, for sure it does, right? Because you can probably do just in time delivery almost, right, depending on where your production facility is and where your distribution facility is and where the LP or where the actual retail outlet is, right? Whereas if you're out west, then if you're Aurora, to get from Edmonton to Toronto is, it's going to be a little bit easier because you're right at the airport, but you still have to get that logistics from the airport to that actual retail location, right?
Right. Okay. And then we were talking also about the Cannabis 2.0 advent, and you mentioned that you saw an interesting video by Aurora. And what was it that you thought was what was it that really made you remark on that?
Well, I mean, they're just really ramping up and showing what the products are. So they kind of rolled out the whole line of what they're going to have, the mints, the gummies, the chocolates. Most people were expecting to see, some type of vape product, even sort of in the wake of everything that's happening with the vapes. But, some of those other products, the mints, the chocolates, those were kind of interesting, and the gummies as well, right? Those are really what you kind of see in the U.S. And then they've also talked about, having some other concentrated product and, some of the live resin and things like that as well.
Yeah. So I guess it's December before we see their products on the shelves in the Ontario Cannabis Store?
Yeah, I think you'll start to see a few in December, but I would, more realistically count on probably the new year, probably Q1 of next year before you really start to see things rolled out. Right.
Okay, and so what is your sort of takeaway for the week ahead in terms of, we've been bouncing along this bottom here. Had three green days this week in the cannabis sector generally. Do you see that we are sort of finding a bottom here, or do you think there's more pain to come?
Well, we look at a lot of different technical indicators, and from a lot of those, we're actually seeing that the market's obviously really oversold, and we've seen some individual signs on individual stocks that it looks like perhaps we could be starting to see that bottom and things could move back up. Obviously, we'd need the big catalyst, and I think it was Wednesday night that everyone was all excited because the Chronos shares were up in the aftermarket by about 40%, and people weren't too sure what that was, but they were all speculating. It sounds like it may have been just a case of someone trying to cover their short position, and they got probably a little over aggressive with what they were doing, but. If they were down or if they had made, a 60 or 70 or 80% return, then, that really still would have been profitable for them. That's the first sign that we probably need to see, is that the shorts aren't continuing to press here. And from what we understand, that still has been the case. There's still stock that's being lent out to be shorted. So we would need that short covering rally to begin with. And then, if you had some other type of catalyst, if you did see, another major company come into the space for an investment, if that was pharmaceutical company or if that was a traditional CPG company, then obviously that would be the catalyst. The other catalyst that could be is as things start to move through the U.S., if you were to see that SAFE Act continuing to work its way through the Senate and it looked like it was going to get through, that would also be another catalyst. So one of those big industry catalysts could be just right around the corner, and with the sort of pent up demand of being so oversold, it could have a fairly dramatic move in a week.
Right. All right, Bruce, that's a fantastic contribution as usual. We'll talk to you again next Friday. Thanks for joining us.
Sounds good.
If you like the show, you'll love our website. Visit us at www.midasletter.com for interviews with key CEOs, cannabis news, and to subscribe to our newsletter. You got to turn the mics back on.
Am I on?
Are you on? Are
Yeah.
we on? Is this thing on? Yeah, we're on.
All right, good.
Hey!
Woo!
Anyways, so Todd, you have a interesting transaction. We can't talk about that
I can talk
yet. In broad strokes?
In broad
I'll
strokes.
let you describe it.
We're I don't even know what I can say or not say as a CEO.
Okay, let's skip it.
Yeah. Well,
Why?
I can tell you this. It's in the psychedelic space.
Okay.
It has to do with psilocybin.
So you have a deal, an investment opportunity coming up for investors in the psychedelic space involving psilocybin.
Yes, and that I actually quite candidly thought it was going to be announced today. But we're just, as you know, when it comes to this game, everything has to be extraordinarily, on the compliance side and legal side and stuff. And then obviously, in my opinion, it's going to strike itself as a very, a tremendous opportunity.
And are there, I know that the state of Colorado actually legalized psilocybin, decriminalized.
Yes.
So it's not actually regulated as a legal substance
No,
yet.
not yet.
Okay, but is that the trend? Is that the next big wave here we're going to see?
Without a doubt, in my opinion.
Really?
Yes, I think that the FDA, within 5 to 7 years, you're going to start to see a much more softened approach to how they approach psilocybin and psychedelics in terms
More
of
of a
treatment.
Portugal approach.
Well, decriminalization. Portugal's approach is amazing, by the way. Did I tell you that we talk about the Portugal approach on this show before? I'm sure you have many times.
We've talked about it in the past, but I don't think you and I have discussed it.
Loosely based numbers in Portugal, basically what they did is they took 100% of their budgets in terms of fighting drugs, and they used, originally it was like 90% of it was for policing and enforcing, and 10% was for education and rehabilitation, and they just switched those numbers. So now with the decriminalization of all drugs in Portugal, they use 90% for education, for rehabilitating, and 10% for the enforcement and policing. Deaths are down, suicides are down, overdoses are down. And I think people are really, listen, at the end of the day, people get this stuff anyway, right?
Right.
So what's the most important thing? It's education, it's understanding, and it's helping.
Yeah.
We need to help people more. We don't want people to go and get addicted to these types of things. We don't want people to lose jobs because they're getting into drugs. And with education and with being out there and helping people, that's what we can do. And I do think the psychedelic trend, from everything we're hearing with that individuals who have been involved in, the guys going to Rogan and stuff, who've been involved in the space for quite some time, we're really seeing about, hearing about that reset that you get within your mind. We're really hearing about the ability to live in the moment more, especially when it comes to microdosing. We're hearing about the post-traumatic stress disorder being able to be dealt with and opening up and talking about. And
Don't forget, unbridled belly laughter.
Oh, and when those trees turn into big ants.
Well, that's what all I remember is laughing so hard that my cheeks would be sore and my abs would be sore the next morning. And it was like, anything that does that to you cannot be bad.
No,
It cannot be bad.
That stucco ceiling is hilarious.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny. I was a huge consumer of magic mushrooms for probably most of my 20s.
How candid you are, dude.
Well, the great thing about the now of now is that it's no longer something to be embarrassed about.
Yeah.
It's a badge of honor, to be honest, like to have finally the law catch up with something that you always felt was right and lived that feeling, and now to be validated by society generally is a very warm feeling for an individual who's always felt like is under the thumb and is sort of in the crime world. And it's like, it's great to realize, or at least get the agreement of society generally, that was not the case. They made a mistake. We were right all along, which might be a little bit of a generous interpretation to my own benefit, but that's the one I'm operating on.
And James, so I really truly believe that is not you just saying that. That is the sentiments of many people. And the way we're seeing right now, the youth do this big protest against, carbon emissions and obviously standing for climate change and, making sure that we're doing something about that. I think, and this is why I want to get into this space, and we've compiled a team of people and we're doing this, that the next big wave will be the protest against Big Pharma. And you're going to see youth go, no, I don't want to be prescribed something I don't understand. I don't want to have an opportunity to get addicted to something that's going to destroy my life. I want a more natural approach. I want to be connected more to the earth, which we're seeing with cannabis, which is a plant, and which we're seeing with shrooms and psychedelics, which are a fungi. Fungi. People call it everything.
Everything's a lot more fun on it, that's for sure.
And there's a great documentary that people should watch on the nature of things with David Suzuki on mushrooms and the power of mushrooms themselves, beyond the psychedelics. It's an amazing, it's unreal really what the mushroom can do, including penetrating through rocks to survive. Think about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's that top. There's a topic we could go off on for hours. We should probably eat a couple of grams of mushrooms before we try. But the interesting thing to me is that they are discovering the very high potential for the medically important attributes of cannabis as the first psychedelic plant that is being, invited into the realm of the legal. And to find that these plants actually do have a therapeutic, beneficial, positive effect on the human being, especially the human being who has perhaps mental illness or other biochemical misalignments, is very, that's profound, to think that we could be curing ourselves with plants that are around us all the time instead of creating synthetic derivations of the same and creating problems for ourselves. Thus, it's remarkable. It's like we're finding out that the simplest.
Well, doesn't it make sense? Like that's like at the end of the day, if you just think about it logically, that's something that's been presented to us to help us. Doesn't that actually just make sense? Much like food is presented to us, much like why they're trying to steer you away from processed foods these days as opposed to natural foods. The organic now new approach. That's what people are going to start to think of as medicines, the organic medicines, and that's going to be, in Asia, the mushroom is studied, to help cure cancer for generations, for thousands of years, to help with things like, ailments like cancer and disease and stuff.
Right.
And so anyway, we're really excited by this, and this is about a team of people around me that know far more than I do. I'm just kind of the cute guy who can talk about this stuff.
Okay. Well, great. All right. Well, so we've just received a news release that has gone out this afternoon from RavenQuest Bio. And this is interesting because the press release essentially announces that Bonify, which is a private cannabis company that had its license suspended by Health Canada, has now had its license reinstated by Health Canada thanks to the consulting participation of RavenQuest CEO George Robinson. Full disclosure, RavenQuest is a sponsor of the show. Big surprise how we got that news before anybody else, but RavenQuest is excited about this for the simple reason that this kind of is the first time in the history of legal cannabis in Canada that a company has been reinstated in its previous form by taking remedial action. And so, interestingly, here's a little tip for you. What do you think this will do for the shares of CanTrust on Monday?
I think people will see most likely that there is light at the end of the tunnel now, that if there was an offense committed, that there is an opportunity for, obviously, talk about rehabilitation, for a company to do that and to show from what they've done was wrong, and perhaps, become a licensed LP again, which will probably help it, I would imagine.
All right, George Robinson is here now. He's going to tell us about it.
RavenQuest Biomed is a diversified cannabis company with divisions focused upon cannabis production, management services and consulting, and specialized research and development. RavenQuest maintains a research partnership with McGill University focused on cultivar strain recognition, plant stabilization, and yield maximization of the cannabis plant. The company focuses on partnerships with indigenous communities. RavenQuest Biomed trades on the CSE under the symbol RQB.
George Robinson joins me now, CEO of RavenQuest Biomed. George, welcome back.
Awesome. Good to be back.
George, interesting press release today. You are now Bonify, the company that RavenQuest was assisting recover its license, has successfully regained its status with Health Canada. That's a first in the entire history of the system, if I'm not mistaken.
First of its kind. There's a pathway back from, let's say, the suspension. There's now a pathway back to getting your full license back. And this press release talks about, from the RavenQuest side, talks about that they have the full capacity to sell to anyone, to a patient, to a province. They can sell now outside of the country, inside of the country. It's a full reinstatement of the license. So we now have created a pathway back from suspension to full license.
So is this a possibility that CanTrust is exploring as well?
Well, I mean, I'm sure they're starting to discover the pathway, and it's not easy to go down. And we've heard things that have happened there in the last few days. But now this creates a probability story that if they follow the right process, they can also get their license back.
Okay, and your role as CEO of RavenQuest was to spearhead all of the aspects that Bonify had to go through, and in that process, you became also the CEO of Bonify.
Correct. Yeah. So they needed some leadership there that they could rely on, I guess, and knew the regulations. So they brought me in as their interim CEO to sort of guide that process for them, and that was a very exciting role. And then with the RavenQuest hat, I was the lead sort of person on our team of about 7 or 8 people that reestablished the culture, the processes, the standard operating procedures to put that facility back on the right path. So it was interesting wearing both hats, but I think it worked out for the best. Is that Health Canada knew that they had someone at the helm of the company that understood the processes, the challenges that were faced, and how to create a culture that would bring them back to the point where Health Canada would feel comfortable that Bonify could run on its own. And I think RavenQuest and our team of consultants really understood that very well. And what drives our company anyhow, because we run our company the same way that we manage Bonify.
Sure. So what does this make Bonify now? Like, what is its footprint? What is its status? What's it going to become?
Yeah, with my Bonify hat on, I'm really lucky to say that it's a small company, small private company. Now we can edge back into the sales side of the business and start generating revenue. Luckily, we were able to maintain our cultivation license, so we'll be able to fill the vault up completely with product, dried flower. So now what that allows us to do to get instantaneously back into revenue. So we've been working very diligently on taking a look at what those opportunities look like, what the brand of the company will look like. But again, a small private company, now just with our head down, wanting to do the right things for the right reason to get back into revenue, which will start in the near term.
Does RavenQuest, Biomed, or Bonify have a strategy in place for the edibles market at this point?
RavenQuest does for sure. I mean, we have already talked about our joint venture with Not So Gentle Tea to create the tea product, which I think is one of the most reasonable ways to bring certain demographics into it. We now know that there's a large need for tea, a lot of younger people drinking tea, but we also think that there's an older demographic for it. So that, for us and RavenQuest, is one of the paths. And we've talked about the vaping process. I think what we're doing right now, yesterday McGill had its inauguration of the now 92 researchers. 6 faculties are now completely embedded into cannabis research. We are going to be actually testing our vape product there to make sure there's no harm. With all the other stuff that's going on about vape products, we're going to take the pathway of actually testing our product to make sure that there's no harm, take that study to Health Canada along with our product to actually get our vape pen license. So it's a different approach, but we think it's the right one with all the negativity around vaping right now.
You bet. So does that mean you're going to use McGill's medical campus to actually conduct medical analysis of the effects of vaping?
Exactly. So it's very interesting. When you start talking about it, what they have there, they have probably the most unique equipment to actually help us do what we want to do. For example, we can now do what we call imaging, or our magnetic imaging of it, and also what we call drug discovery. So what we're doing is actually taking the cannabis molecule, and we're going to look at it in 3 dimensions to see what's all in there, rather than just the 2-dimensional images that we get typically from HPLCs. So what we're going to do there is understand what's in behind it, and then with that we're going to be able to use in the toxicology side, is now we're going to be able to draw it in through the toxicology side and see in the vaping process or in the compounds is anything not, let's say, converting appropriately through the vape products that could cause harm. And we just think that that's what Canada and what the world's going to need is someone to step forward and say, if you're going to get into the vaping business, prove a no harm strategy that you're doing in long before you can get to efficacy and all that other stuff.
Right. So will the sort of vape testing protocols established at the McGill Cannabis Center for Excellence become an industry standard for testing vaping ahead of product releases?
We don't know, but that's one of the things I'd like to be able to do is start to saying, okay, let's start looking at this differently. Let's not look at strict commercialization, let's look at harm. But if we can do it at McGill first, then maybe it can also become a standard. But there may be other things that other universities or other testing agencies want to do. But I think if we start there, people are going to look at it to say, what else can we do at McGill? Not only RavenQuest, what can other people do there to say, there will be no harm if you choose to use this product.
Right. So that's quite a big deal that McGill has established this Center of Excellence for Cannabis. What is its overarching purpose?
So I think what they wanted to do, and we've been at it, well, I've been working with McGill for 3.5 years. What we want to do is create an understanding about the research of cannabis that's a positive experience for the school. Obviously, I can't speak for the school, but what I heard very clearly is they want to make sure they wouldn't lose any of the donors or alumni if they ventured into the research side of cannabis.
Right.
But if you we're beyond that now, and we had the reputational board approve the process back about 2.5 years ago. What it really means is this: you can go anywhere from studying cannabis in law, finance, which is really just sort of outliers when you think of cannabis. But now you can be in toxicology, you can be in neurology, you can be in pediatrics, you can be in imaging, you can be in drug discovery, you can be in plant sciences. All those researchers work together on the same campus with the same overarching guidelines that this will be a positive for the school. Where many other places have researchers that are working at different universities, but researcher to researcher is very different than a whole campus and a whole school, backing it from a funding perspective, backing it from a positive experience for the researchers. So this is where I see the benefit of it. And right now, it's the largest institution or even university that's backing up with 6 faculties and 92 researchers. And yesterday we heard about some of the early research that's starting already, which was unbelievable.
Wow, I can't wait to learn more about that. Okay, so then what's driving the engine at RavenQuest now? You guys are still executing, firing on all cylinders. This Bonafide business constitutes a revenue event for RavenQuest and is representative of a somewhat typical consulting engagement?
Yeah, I think the revenue side on the Bonafide side really just tells the world that, you know, not only are we a technology company that grows cannabis, we're also a consulting company that can help people when things get into trouble or they need some help in that area. So maybe if you take a look at it on a broader scheme of outside of Canada, that consulting experience is going to be of extremely high value. Even if you remember at McGill, we actually helped write some of their applications for their research and development licenses. So the consulting arm actually creates a lot of value to the company, and having revenue continue to develop out of the consulting side, you know, kind of helps along the idea of offsetting some of the costs. Remember, a lot of our consultants are still the managers of our business, so they're actually driving revenue at the same time they're managing our business. So it's really quite exciting to maintain that consulting arm.
You bet. All right, that's a great update as per usual, George. We'll leave it there for now and come back to you soon. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
If you're enjoying the show, subscribe to Midas Letter on YouTube so you stay up to date on everything investment. All right, if you enjoyed our show, go visit Todd's website or subscribe to his Twitter channel.
Yeah.
At I am Toddy Tickles is your handle.
I got to change that, I think.
Why?
I don't know.
It's kind of funny.
It's a little
cute.
corny. It's cute. It's been a lot. It's been, you know what? Yeah. But or you'll be on my show later today.
I'm going to be on your show later today. Todd is on Sirius XM 167 Canada Talks. And that's at what time today?
Yeah, well, you'll be on at 6, but I'm 5 to 7.
5 to 7. All right.
And thank you very much. I really enjoy being here.
Thank you. There's our show for today. Don't forget to sign up at MidasLetter.com for our growing family of newsletters. And see you later. Have a great weekend.